Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Well, howdy folks, my name is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And we're the hosts of The Exorcist Minute, a show where we examine, extrapolate, and excavate the scariest movie of all time.
Each episode covers a single minute of William Friedkin's 1973 horror masterpiece, The Exorcist.
If you like deep dives, this show is the deepest.
Did you know the film's iconic theme song, Tubular Bells, wasn't written specifically for the movie?
Or that the 1973 audience members were throwing up and fainting in the theater before they ever got a glimpse of the demon?
What about all the crazy on-set mishaps, cast injuries, the director firing real guns?
Ooh. Ever wonder where Ouija boards came from or how they got their name? How about some history on the Catholic Church or the Roman rite of exorcism? Or maybe we can tempt you with some juicy demonology lore. Did you know that Pazuzu had an ex-wife? Find The Exorcist Minute on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your shows or at theexorcistminute.com. Until next time, folks,
the power of The Exorcist compels you.
Ever wonder what bridges the gap between your favorite film genres, subgenres, and movements? CinemaScope is here to explore these connections, taking you on a thrilling odyssey through the ever-evolving art of cinema. I'm your host, Andy Nelson, and in each episode, we embark on a deep dive into the forces that sculpt the world of film. From the styles you know and love, like heist films or the French New Wave, to the ones you may not be as familiar with, like Turkish Yeşilçam or Brazilian Nordwesterns, my expert guests and I unravel the complex tapestry of storytelling, style, and innovation that defines the world of film as we unpack the myriad catalysts of change that shape these diverse styles. Whether you're a student of film, a creative professional, or simply a devoted movie enthusiast, CinemaScope is your gateway to a richer, more immersive film experience. Don't just watch movies, understand them, appreciate them, and revel in their artistry with CinemaScope. Subscribe today.
Hello and welcome to listeners of both the Superhero Ethics and Star Wars Generations podcast. This is Matthew, your host for both of those. I'm sorry to say that this has been a really crazy week, and just this morning we found out that my grandfather had passed away, my spouse's grandfather, but he'd been a grandfather to me as well. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on, a lot of arrangements to be made, a lot of family stuff happening. And so I'm not going to be able to record episodes for either of these podcasts this week. And so I'm putting this out as my apology. I think we're going to have an older episode attached at the end of this as a rebroadcast, hopefully something you haven't heard before, because for those of you who are newer listeners or something that maybe you had heard quite a while ago but have forgotten and maybe think about differently today. So please enjoy. And again, my apologies. Thank you all so very much. We have spoken.
Hello, friends. Are you ready for something spooky? Are you ready for something terrifying? Are you ready for what happens when the Star Wars Universe podcast and the Animation Deliberation podcast team up to talk about Star Wars, Lego, and terrifying tales? If you are friends, then gather around a Lego electronic fire as we dive into this special episode. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over.
Ooh, ha 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 ha.
It's time for Star Wars Animation I don't know the song, but I'm so happy to have Jay Scotty here with me. This is one of the great moments where we have a kind of interplay between two of our target areas. So myself, as the Star Wars guy, reached out to Jay Scotty. You guys have been doing some great coverage on all things animated. I found out about this animated Lego Star Wars Halloween thing, and I just thought this would be a great thing for us to team up on, and I'm so glad you can join me.
Yeah, I appreciate that valiant effort there. Definitely got a laugh out of me. But yeah, it's been a while since we've had an opportunity to do a little bit of a collaboration. So yeah, anytime we've got Star Wars animated content out there, I'm excited to talk about it. And this was just a real fun one. Not too scary, but fun.
Yeah, it's Lego Disney scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I will say that I thought the battle droids in this were much scarier than any in the Clone Wars.
That's fair. That's entirely fair.
So we're not really. We were kind of talking back and forth about should we have a spoiler section, because this is all very much non-canonical, like even more so than the anime shorts. What was the name of that project? The Star Wars
Visions. It was
Star Wars Visions.
7 studios brought us 9 stories.
Which you all on the Animation Deliberation podcast did great coverage on. Definitely check it out. Those are, as I understand it, kind of non-canonical, but still supposed to be kind of serious stories. This is a Lego story. It is purely just for fun and satire, and also to kind of sort of fill in some canonical points, but also just clearly having so much fun with it. And so I guess we're going to talk a little bit about it in general, and then we will get into a spoiler section, and that we're going to talk about, all the actual things that happened. Mm-hmm. But I also think this is one where, the main thing we're going to be spoiling for you is the great jokes. So it's 45 minutes long. If you haven't watched it yet, maybe hit pause, go watch it. Or if you just want to hear about it, we will happily kind of walk you through it.
Yeah. I do want to point out, it's interesting the fact that this is a collaboration between two podcasts. I really admire the partnership between Lego and Star Wars. Like, even before Disney bought Star Wars, it was just one of my favorite team-ups. I didn't buy a ton of Legos when I was growing up, but anytime I did buy a Lego set, it was a Star Wars Lego set. So just awesome to see the way it's succeeded and persisted.
Yeah, and it's funny. That's a good point that I hadn't thought of before, but you're right, because by this point, I think we've gotten used to the Lego video games, which have teamed up with almost every big movie or big entertainment franchise. We have Lego Harry Potter. We have Lego MCU. I think there's, probably Lego, I don't know if there's Lego Fast and Furious, because you probably can't get those bathing suits on the Lego parts. But, there's almost everything Lego out there. But you're right, Lego and Star Wars have been doing stuff. I mean, I remember as a kid putting together, like Lego X-Wings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a great place to start, is because what I wanted to ask you about, especially coming from the animation side, and you noticing a lot that I haven't really seen, I think this is kind of a good time to talk about this whole idea of the Lego animated show. Because, Legos for a while were just this thing that you constructed, and then you had Lego video games, which were really kind of fun, and I think they may have even started with Star Wars, but certainly Star Wars was in there pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And then we started to get, I think starting with the Lego movie, we started to get kind of animated movies in the style of Lego and the Lego-verse. And now we're getting to the point where we're getting specials and all sorts of, stuff, especially with Star Wars and Disney products. Talk to us about from the animation side. Like, what's that process been like? And what's it been like kind of seeing it as a huge animation fan?
Oh, it's definitely evolved, and just the level of detail and quality that we got to this point is just, it really blows my mind, and that's honestly the biggest takeaway outside of some really, really funny jokes. I think we saw the biggest evolution in 2014 when we got the Lego movie, the theatrical release.
Right.
And that's just where they developed a new technique where the CG got to such a level that it actually looked like models, and you can see the different textures, and like it looked like different materials, different plastics, different polymers. And you're talking about just making the transition to video games and shows as well. Like, and I think this special here for me is far and away where they've mastered that technique that they took from the movie, and they've been able to incorporate this, and just that marriage with Star Wars works so well, because not only are you just getting like all those different textures I'm talking about, but the various reflections off of Poe's visor while he's out in space, and then they combine that with what works so well for the Star Wars films, especially the original trilogy compared to the prequel trilogy, not to mince things too much there, but one of the best things about Star Wars is that lived-in feel, like everything's a little broken down, and I appreciated that with just all the detail on the planet, Mustafar, even Poe's X-Wing, just the various little blemishes here and there. It's just such attention to detail. It's the other animated series that we focused a lot on was Bad Batch, and I haven't seen Rebels or most of Clone Wars, but I dare say, obviously this is a different style, but just the level of detail and almost being lifelike in terms of depicting like certain cloth and plastics and whatnot. It's there.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing they do, and I'm so glad you can put it into better words than I ever could, because especially, I think you're right, starting with the Lego movie, but then getting even better and better. I think of Lego Batman as honestly one of the best Batman versions out there.
Oh, yeah, great call.
I love Batman.
Yeah, for sure.
But, I feel like this one especially, we've gotten to the point where it doesn't look like you have built a set out of Legos. It looks like that Lego is just that it is a full world that happens to be out of Legos,
Right.
And like, to me, one of the best examples is you could show me a Poe Dameron who has a beard but also has like Lego pieces. Mm-hmm. But instead they don't do that. What they show is what looks very clearly like someone built a Lego Poe Dameron, including a headpiece that has a beard drawn on it. You know? And so it doesn't look like he has a beard. It looks like he's a Lego piece with a beard that's drawn on it, and very clearly like 2D of the 3D thing, but it still works so perfectly.
Oh, yeah. That's a great call. I think Poe in particular, just because we got to spend so much time with him, we got to see him undergo so many various changes, and even speaking to like when he crashed, just like I appreciated the fact that the blemishes and the smoke that had collected on his face, like that didn't just go away when we went to the next scene. Like that persisted until when he met the Hutt actually wiped away to like get a clearer picture that this was the legendary Poe Dameron. So,
right. The other thing I picked up on, I'm curious if this is new to Lego or if this is something that's been happening before, but I just kind of missed. There were a couple of times in this where, you know, they were doing a parody of an already existing Lego movie, or an already existing Star Wars movie, and in one case, a 1980s bad vampire classic, which I'm a huge fan of, which we'll get into.
Right.
And there were shots where it was a perfect shot-for-shot remake, even though it was Lego, you know? And, like, there's one scene where, you know, this isn't really a spoiler, it's a plot. Like, there's a scene where the characters are switched around in terms of who's flying what, but it is X-Wings flying down the trench of the Death Star while TIE fighters are shooting at them. And it was hard, like, I had a few moments where I was like, wait, did they just take a shot from the movie and put it? No, they actually just, like, painstakingly, point for point, rebuilt that exact shot, but using the digital Legos. Yeah.
You really do feel the love and the passion for all the films, the original trilogy, the prequel. The prequels. With Poe being the focal character, we didn't really explore too much with the sequel trilogy, but just the fact that he's there. I guess with Kylo Ren, we did a little bit, but yeah, it's approachable for every single fan of Star Wars.
Yeah. Let me ask you one other point about the animation, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah.
You said something about models. Say more about that. So are they drawing everything, but just drawing things that look like Legos? Do they have kind of computer programs where they're basically like building things out of Legos electronically, and that's what you're seeing? It's so interesting to me to see like toys being animated.
Yeah, it's the latter, what you said there. They do these 3D models, and they actually build the individual Lego pieces. So you have the legs that connect to the torso, and then the arms with the individual hand pieces, and they basically rig all those together in a puppet system. I can't say for certain which program they're using, but yeah, they take all these various pieces, and then once they're assembled, they can manipulate them as they want, or program the animation to follow suit, and then they can add the other elements on top of it. So it really is it's outside of my actual full understanding. I'm sure it's a little more complicated than that, but it really is impressive. Just
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I especially love that they're doing that because yes, they're doing it digitally and with animation, but by being so true to the pieces, it feels like you'd obviously have to spend a lot of money and an incredible amount of work, but someone with like actual Legos and a movie camera could do some kind of stop motion that was pretty similar to this, not with the same things moving in the same way necessarily, but like that, knowing that this is a animated depiction of something you could actually do with Legos if you had every single piece is just really kind of cool.
Oh yeah, and there are tons of people out there making little short films with their Legos, so definitely seek those out if you appreciated this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously with the illumination of like exhaust on the X-Wing and stuff like that, and incorporating like real world environments, you can't necessarily do everything to the T like that, but
the facial expressions on the Lego heads is not yet possible, but who knows?
Unless you want to get fancy and Clorox off your Lego faces and draw new ones.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, because there you have like stop motion and some actual technical animation.
True, for sure.
All right, so let's kind of get into the spoiler section, such as it is, and talk about like the stuff that happens in the movie itself, the special itself. But I wanted to start just kind of with, again, a general topic. For me, I feel like one of the things that this does so well, and part of why I love it, I'm curious your thoughts is, I feel like it, a lot of satire or parody can feel like it can feel almost mean-spirited, and where it's, the aim is to kind of like make fun of the people who really enjoy this. I feel like this is straight up parody. It's satire. There's a lot of jokes that are really making fun of, like, you know, plot holes and things like that.
Sure.
But to me, it felt like it was done with so much love. You know, it's kind of this is being done by fans who like to poke fun at themselves, not outsiders poking fun at the fans. Is that the sense you get? Totally.
I already kind of alluded to the love that is so clearly there, but it's just one of those things. Anybody that's been a Star Wars fan for any number of years, not to get into the toxic fandom too much, but obviously people have had different receptions to the various iterations of Star Wars out there. So I think it's nice that people can kind of take it tongue in cheek and acknowledge the shortcomings, but it like you alluded to, it's in an affectionate and loving way. It's not the people versus George Lucas. It's a celebration of all things, even the shortcomings, because that's what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great way of saying it. That's the celebration. And, you know, honestly, if there's anyone who I think kind of gets the most skewered by this, it's probably the Disney Corporation.
Oh, sure.
You know, in terms of how much of the story revolves around, you know, a hut wanting to commercialize all this great nostalgia and storytelling, which I think is a pretty clear reference to, you know, there's a moment where the Darth Vader at the souvenir park says, "I find your lack of souvenirs disturbing." And, you know, but it's the kind of thing that, like, makes you both be like, yeah, that's like the Disney corporatizing everything is not cool. I should go to Galaxy's Edge and buy some souvenirs, you know?
Just make sure you don't get a blade of Scardant.
Yes. Or a Wookiee's paw.
That too.
So what other kind of general thoughts? What else do you really like about this, or kind of general things you wanted to comment on?
I think I've alluded to it for the most part. The opening title gag was a real pleasure as we've gotten more and more of these Star Wars TV series on the Disney Plus app. We've gotten used to that, like, opening title sequence where you get the various helmets. So I definitely wasn't expecting to have Poe pop up. So that was just really funny. Outside of that, I'll make note of some of the notable star-studded, like, voice performers that they pulled out. So Christian Slater appeared as Ren, a character that we haven't seen forthright in Star Wars yet, which I kind of appreciated that. James Arnold Taylor returned to voice Obi-Wan Kenobi, as well as Matthew Wood voicing General Grievous, and then Sam Witwer doing Darth Maul. But then the other big one for me was Tony Hale as Vinay. And it took me a while to actually realize we had that, like, opening sequence where we got reintroduced to Vinay, but Vinay has only had one scene in all of Star Wars, and that was basically in Rogue One when he was Vader's doorman for Krennic.
Oh, I was wondering if that was a completely new character, if that was someone who's real. Oh, that's kind of awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's been explored further in, like, books or comics. I know Vader's got a long-standing comic series out there, but yeah, it was nice to be able to take just a one-off character and flip him on his head so much. And Tony Hale's one of the best people to do that, just to really sell you on the insanity of the character.
Yeah, he had one of those voices that I definitely recognized, but I couldn't. I had to kind of look up to see if it was Mark Hamill doing kind of a Joker thing.
Sure.
So tell me more about Tony and what stuff he's done.
He's probably most noted for his live-action performances, but on Arrested Development, he was the youngest of the Bluth siblings, Buster Bluth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, and he's done various voice roles outside of that. I want to say he had a role in Big Hero 6, but I can't say off the top of my head. I don't have that information readily available. But he's definitely a celebrated performer.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, so it's kind of like there's basically 4 stories that we get here. There's the main story, and then we have kind of a very, like, there's a lot of tropes that this plays on, but in ways that feel like honoring and making them their own instead of making them cliches. And, you know, one of the tropes is, and I think The Simpsons does this all the time, but also some other shows, is you have a very loose plot about something scary, and then it gives you the excuse to tell a lot of, like, mini stories inside it. So we have this kind of main story, and then the 3 stories that Vinay tells over the course of the tale. So just with the main story, you know, it's this kind of loose idea of, we're in the sequels era. Vader is dead. The Emperor is dead. Vinay is this guy who is still on Mustafar and wants to find a some Sith relics and have ultimate power again. And Poe Dameron crashes on the planet, and there's this other kid who's hanging around named Dean, who it turns out is Force capable. Mm-hmm. And there's just the kind of classic Star Wars beats of, is Dean going to be able to face his fears? Will Poe be able to admit his shortcomings? Can the two of them stop this dark side person from mwahaha ultimate power?
Right.
How'd you kind of feel about kind of that main story we got there?
I'll be honest, initially, when we first got introduced to, like, Graballa the Hutt and all that, mm-hmm. I wasn't too sure how to take it.
Yeah, that's the other actually big prop point is part of what's happening here is that Graballa the Hutt he wants to turn Mustafar into an amusement park.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, yeah. So, he's turning Vader's castle into Vader's hotel, like a big resort that is basically just like you described, like Galaxy's Edge. But at that point, I wasn't entirely sure how to take it. It felt, I could tell that it was going into the anthology territory, but I didn't know if things were going to be entirely disconnected or if the story mm-hmm. was providing a framework. So by the end, I was actually really satisfied with it, and I liked the trajectory, and I liked how Vinay kind of didn't really show his hand. He was really broadcasting that comical kind of ineffective geezer, not to be offensive, kind of portrayal there. But by the end, he assembled everything he needed to kind of have this actually pretty intimidating force and threat for our heroes. So. Yeah. I was pretty satisfied by the end.
Yeah, he turned into what I referred to as Darth Mecha.
Okay.
That great kind of, the Mecha warrior of like, basically this Legos, it's kind of like almost an Iron Man suit, especially because he's got this Sith artifact right in the heart of it,
Yep.
And there's this big metal suit with a huge lightsaber. And yeah, I just thought it was if it was in something I was supposed to take seriously, it'd be ridiculous. But for this, it just felt so fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and along the way, we get to learn more about our heroes, especially like Dean. He obviously has this connection to Poe, them both having Poe's already a pilot, but Dean has the aspirations to be a pilot, and actually does have some echoes of Anakin and Episode 1 being enslaved by Watto and whatnot, with Dean having this job that he just can't lose. But even with Vinay vocalizing it, like, you think Poe is supposed to be the real hero of the story, but it's nice that this is kind of kid-centric, especially with the Lego background there, that Dean got to step up and actually be the one that saves the day. I thought it was pretty heartwarming in that regard, even though everything had the spooky backdrop.
Yeah. And especially because he hits a lot of the same story beats we've seen before about facing his fear and being a little tempted by the dark side, but stepping away from it. And one thing I picked up on, or at least, and I don't know if this is 100% headcanon that I'm inserting, but I feel like maybe it was intentional, and something that stories like this do is they'll do something where it could be totally random, or it could be a connection to a movie if you want to headcanon it that way. At the very end of The Last Jedi, we see that there's this character on Canto Bight who, saw the people come and rescue, and, he knows the stories about the great Luke Skywalker, and he has a little bit of force power. He makes the broom go into his hand. Mm-hmm. And, everyone has talked infinitum about J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson not being on the same page, and story beats that both of them set up being dropped by the other. Not to get into any of the right or wrong about that, but this is, I think, one of them that people often point to is like whatever happened to that kid. If I'm understanding correctly, the kid is about the right age. And he's once again a person who is doing kind of like handyman work. Now he's doing like fix-it work instead of sweeping up. But he's probably about the right age. He looks a little similar. So I like the idea, and he's force sensitive. So I like the idea that maybe it's that same kid.
Yeah. I won't argue against it. If you want it, it's there for you, yeah. We didn't get a name for him. He's just Broom Kid. So if you want to retroactively make him Dean, works for me.
There you go.
Yeah.
I get that. Other stuff I thought that was just kind of fun about the main story. I agree with you. I wasn't super on board with the beginning, but I thought it was like a fine setup for where they were going. It is, though, fun to see the Hutts. To me, they were almost more like Ferengi in this, and just the kind of like everything has to be through the lens of profit. We're not really going to think about like, is this right or wrong?
Right.
And I thought it was kind of a fun way of having three different sides in this. There's the good people, the good guys, quote unquote. There's the clear, like, dark side users. And then there's this guy in the middle who just wants to make cash.
Right.
So let's kind of get into the stories we told then. So the first one is that and this is, I mean, obviously it's non-canonical, but we do get a version of the story that a lot of people have been wanting to hear about. We get introduced to the actual Knights of Ren.
Yes.
And what happened to Ben Solo to turn him to the dark side. And it is all done as a 100% montage to one of my favorite awful 80s movies, The Lost Boys. Yeah. And it's literally called The Lost Boy, and the logo's the same. And you're not of that generation. So had you seen The Lost Boys going into this?
I have seen The Lost Boys. Yes, I am familiar with it. Yes. So I was able to appreciate all the references, especially with, I already mentioned Christian Slater portraying Ren, this being the first time we've seen him, quote unquote, on screen. But I absolutely loved with the whole Solo, join us, Solo. Like, I could totally hear Kiefer Sutherland doing his Michael. It was just a great reference there.
I was referring to him as Darth Kiefer as
I
was taking notes on this, and that one I think was the one where they really did just a very faithful, like, I mean, they make fun of it in all the best ways. I often refer to that movie as being 99.9% plot-free. And that one of the most ridiculous things in the movie is that when they're trying to show you, like, how punk this gathering of punk vampire kids is, they cut to a saxophonist. So the fact that they had a saxophonist, they had an 80s music montage.
Yeah.
They completely reproduced the scene of the vampires all hanging from the underside of a bridge. Like, it was just such a beautiful, like... It was just such a beautiful, like, homage to Lost Boys for no reason at all. Just like, hey, what should we reference here? How about this movie that no one's thought about in 30 years? Yeah. Sure, let's do it.
I have to imagine, I have to imagine that was as much for the animators and the creators as for the parents that were watching that, because obviously with it being Lego, there are a lot of gags in there. Some of them are more slapsticky, which don't necessarily resonate with me as much, but I can definitely put up with them. So I think this just whole homage to The Lost Boys, even as soon as you see the title card, The Lost Boy, you know what you're in store for. Yeah, I think that was totally for the adults and the parents, and I definitely appreciated it. And hopefully the kids out there, even if they didn't catch the reference, they still had fun just seeing, the subversion of expectations there, where you think to see Kylo and the founding of the Knights of Ren, you think it's going to be something a little more dark, but to see it just be so tongue-in-cheek is a lot of fun.
Definitely. And it was funny because I think you're mostly right. It's very tongue-in-cheek. There was one scene, though, where, and again, it's a straight homage to Lost Boys, where Ben is kind of going through this, like, he's not quite sure what's happening. It's sort of a dream, but it's sort of reality of the crazy journey that the Knights are taking him on. And at one point, he's kind of in the middle of this circle of, like, children from the Star Wars universe, including some, like, baby droids and, like, small versions of other characters. And they're singing a version of the, like, da 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 da, which I think is something that happens in the movie, but they're singing it in Huttese.
Oh.
And it just, like, I just thought that one moment was, like, super creepy in a wonderful way.
Nice. I somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I saw, like, the subtitles said singing in Huttese, but I'm not sure I made the exact connection you did, so I appreciate you pointing that out. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So then the second story we get is the tale of the Saber of Skardon, or as it's referred to, the Dueling Monstrosities. And this is where we have both Darth Maul kind of returning from the dead, and also we get what's never really been told on screen to this extent before, even though it's told in the comics, the origin story of General Grievous, and that they are both trying to find this Sith artifact that Darth Sidious really wants.
Right.
What did you kind of feel on this one?
I'm just looking at my notes here. I didn't take as many notes on this one. I did enjoy it, and I thought it was fun. I thought it allowed for some of the more high-octane action, quote-unquote, in terms of Lego lightsaber battles. But I did actually, referring to some of the more slapsticky gags and whatnot, I actually did appreciate that about this one, with Darth Maul and General Grievous fighting each other, and cutting off their various multiple limbs, not to be insensitive to any amputees or anything like that. Definitely want to be cognizant of that. But even with like just the Looney Tunes action when General Grievous gets force pushed and hangs for a second in the air before he plummets to the ground and, of course, lands on his head, just really good stuff. And I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the resurrection of Darth Maul. Mm-hmm. But Sam Witwer, he did a great job. Just we never got very many lines out of Maul in the Phantom Menace, so I appreciate Sam Witwer bringing some menace to that.
Yeah, and I will say, as an amputee, I appreciate the sensitivity. I thought the cutting off of limbs, especially with the awful puns that went along with it.
Oh, yes.
He was like, you've been disarmed, or can you not get a leg up? I just thought it was all hilarious.
Good.
And it was done
I'm glad you appreciated it. Good.
in very good fun. And I thought that this one was the one that they really were both kind of like filling in some plot holes. Like I said, we get just a teeny bit, but we get a little bit of the backstory of General Grievous, that he used to be this person named Quaiman J. Shalil, which is his canonical name in the comics and things like that. But also that, you're right, I was not wild originally about the Darth Maul resurrection story. I think he winds up having some wonderful story beats in both Clone Wars and Rebels.
Okay.
So I think that's why I really have come to love the character. But I always thought the fact that he has spider legs is kind of ridiculous and dumb. and so the fact that this really makes fun of that and shows like the Night Sisters trying to figure out what to meld him with and nothing else works.
Right.
I just thought was hilarious. And kind of a nice like little, it's sort of like the same way the other one had been like, well, no one really knows how did Ben become, Kylo. Well, it's again, like no one knows why Maul has those legs. So let's have fun with it.
Yeah. And correct. Well, I guess... Again, I haven't seen large portions of Rebels or Clone Wars, but did the Night Sisters were they characters that appeared on screen and whatnot?
Yeah, the Night Sisters are a very big part of the Clone Wars story, and also do pop up in Rebels and pop up in some of the video games.
I was going to say, I remember the one that made an appearance in Jedi Fallen Order.
Exactly, yeah. And to me, they're one of the most interesting parts of the world building because they're presented as dark side Force users who are not Sith.
Okay.
And kind of just a way of exploring that, like, the Sith and the Jedi don't have a monopoly on this idea of the Force, and that the Force isn't quite as much of an easy binary as some people would think.
Very cool.
And yeah, in that they also explore that, like, the Night Sisters, like, they're all women, but the men of that race, they are the ones that Darth Maul comes from, and it's all on the planet of Dathomir.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
I think the male race is called the Zabrak, but I might be pronouncing it wrong. So feel free to send me angry tweets if you know exactly how that should be pronounced.
Well, if it's not Zabrak, it's probably Zabrak. So yeah.
Right, something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like Zabrak is something from a different story, but it's something similar. But well, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah. So I just thought it was fun. They introduced some kind of ridiculous things, like using the Force to tickle people in battle.
Oh, yeah.
That would be distracting. Like, I can get that. And as silly as it is, also, I do like the idea of Maul and Grievous having this rivalry where they're both fighting for Sidious's affection, because that's actually exactly the kind of manipulative stuff the Sith would do, playing people against each other to prevent them from uniting against you.
Yeah. And then just speaking to General Grievous a little bit more, it's interesting to me that even in Lego format, it's his animated appearances that do the best job of showcasing his capability, because when he had that trek up the mountain where he has like the beast attacking him and whatnot, I was actually pretty satisfied with the choreography of his lightsaber moves and whatnot, and just kind of, I couldn't help but think of Genndy Tartakovsky's 2005, his micro series with Clone Wars, where there's an episode that he really capitalizes on the actual terrifying nature. Like, this was
that's awesome.
Terrifying tales in a funny way. They actually make Grievous terrifying.
Right. I also want to point out, it is nowhere near as close an homage or an adaptation to this movie as the first one was to Lost Boys.
Right.
But I definitely got there's kind of an homage, especially in the beginning as they're being created, to a number of the old Frankenstein movies, and especially to the movie that is kind of an homage to them, Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein.
Oh, nice.
Frankenstein. So that was
Nice.
kind of fun.
Okay. I was
and the third, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as that story was kind of going on, I found myself like, am I missing something? Is there an obvious reference that they're making? But I definitely appreciate the Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monsters homages that you highlighted there. They didn't necessarily resonate or didn't stand out to me in that regard, but now that you highlighted it, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But I also think it makes sense you didn't see that because it is nowhere near as direct a remake as the other one was of The Lost Boys, you know?
Of course, yeah.
So let's talk about the third one, the Wookiee's Paw. What happens in this story, and what do you think of it?
Well, I really found myself appreciating this one a lot, and this is like where the special had kind of like found its rhythm, and I was really enjoying it. But I think a lot of people are familiar with the story of the monkey's paw, in which, you know, you make a wish, but you have some unforeseen consequences. So just going into it with that in mind, I love how this is the one that I think subverted expectations the most, like focusing on Luke Skywalker, and he ends up blowing the Death Star up and being famous for it, but just in a completely different light. And I thought it was hysterical and actually kind of poignant in some ways in the fact that Darth Vader actually had the opportunity to spend time with Luke and actually train him, and you had direct moments where it was Luke interacting with Obi-Wan and Yoda, but Vader got to sub in those instances, and they were training in the dark side, which is not the greatest thing, but I couldn't help but have my heart warmed there.
Yeah, I thought so, and I wanted to ask you, because I saw all of them, but I know you did in-depth episode-by-episode analysis of the recent Marvel show, What If? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if, like, you know, it's all Disney, so maybe they knew about this, or maybe it's just a coincidence, because people have been telling what-if stories for thousands of years. But to me, this was kind of a what-if story, because this was what if Luke had joined the Empire, you know, before Obi-Wan came along. You know, he at one point talks about he wants to submit his application to the Academy. This is what if he'd gone to the Academy. And I say that especially because most of the story beats play out very similarly to A New Hope, but as you said, like, Darth Vader is now playing the part of Obi-Wan. That also means that, Leia Organa, Princess Leia, is the pilot of an X-Wing.
Right.
And Obi-Wan's the pilot of another one. So did you see it in the kind of a what-if light?
No, I think you're 100% on the money. The what-if comparison is right on the money. Sorry to repeat myself there. But and again, I don't know if everyone's watched What If, but the main concept there is in every episode, the watcher, Uatu, our narrator and our guide on these various multiversal stories, he always tells us the one thing that has changed, and you're talking about all the like beat for beat scenes from A New Hope, and even in the opening there, like Luke and Uncle Ben and all their dialogue is almost the exact same. Like, he says that he needs to go to Mos Espa to replace a droid, and Luke says that he wanted to go to the Tashi Station, but instead of going for power converters, he wanted to sign up for the Imperial Academy. So it's like, that's the one little thing that changed, and everything spins out from there.
Yeah. It's a really fun kind of storytelling. And again, it helps to set up the main story. It's mostly just a way to have fun. But to me, I think it may have been my favorite, both because of the way it's so clearly an homage to A New Hope, but also this was the one where really most of all I noticed the shot-for-shot remakes I was talking about before. You know, because you do get the battle in the trench with the X-Wings and the TIE fighters, and, you know, we have those scenes of, you know, like, stay on target. They don't say stay on target, but, you know, the X-Wings flying down the trench, and they just look like they're going fast, and if you look carefully, you see that it's Lego parts, but it's Lego parts perfectly representing those scenes from the original movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really impressive. The Death Star trench run is one of the most iconic sequences still in film, being over 40 years old. And again, we talk about the love and the passion, the attention to detail, and again, talking about the animation technique where they actually are rendering these individual Lego pieces. Like, to do that is absolutely painstaking, and I'm there with you. This was my favorite story, and again, it just kind of speaks to how I was feeling with the special at that point. I think it was the correct momentum, and we talk about the homage that was being paid to other things before, but it again kind of talks about how it subverted expectations. I went into it thinking this was going to be the monkey's paw, where instead it was just so much love for A New Hope.
Yeah. but still honoring the monkey's paw aspect of,
for sure.
and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just kind of like saying one more cool thing because it does and I think this degree of it is sometimes in monkey paw stories, but not always. But it's that kind of old adage about like, if you make a deal with a fae, the wording has to be very exact,
Mm-hmm.
and if you make a wish, your wording has to be very exact because his wish is, I want to be the most famous, pilot in the galaxy.
Right.
And as you said, what he winds up doing is he's supposed to be defending the Death Star. He totally screws up, and so he's the one to blow up the Death Star. And so he becomes really famous as the greatest idiot the galaxy's ever known.
Yeah, he tries to pull off the 180-degree proton move. And again, you mentioned Leia being the pilot of an X-Wing, and you just get to see her capability as well because she says, "Not today, flyboy." And those protons go right where they're supposed to go.
Yep.
And boom.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I don't think we had too much more to say. Is there any other kind of last points you wanted to make about Monkey's Paw or Wookiee's Paw or just the whole thing in general?
Just a few references that I wanted to mention that didn't come up.
Go for it.
This was for the framework story that we got there. Once we got to the end and Vinay was like on his rampage, my favorite reference out of the entire thing, The Shining is my favorite horror movie of all time. So when the droid, I don't have his moniker, but when he said, "Here's BD, blah, 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 blah," with the axe coming through, I knew that I loved this special at that point in time.
Oh, and I've seen The Shining once many years ago. But of course that scene's iconic. I totally missed it at the time.
Okay.
But now you're saying it, I completely see it again. Yeah. I'm so glad you caught that.
Yeah. And then the other one, I don't know if this one was quite as intended, but being a big Lord of the Rings fan, I kind of talked how Dean was given the opportunity to be the hero at the end of the day. That's because he threw the Sith holocron into the lava, and I keep calling him Veneer, but Vinay, being the greedy kind of scheming character that he is, and his greed reaches out for it and falls in the lava. I thought it was a total Return of the King reference with the character of Gollum.
Yeah, that one I definitely picked up on, and I think it's just so fun that I kind of have this image of the people at the Disney Studios for this, or the Lego Studios, having both we want to tell a Star Wars story, but they did have a list of like, let's do the Lost Boys sometime. Let's do that scene from The Hobbit, so from the Lord of the Rings sometimes. And they just are like, all right, let's kind of just kitchen sink this and throw in whatever we can to figure out a way to make these cool references.
For sure.
One other little thing I wanted to point out, and this we pointed out in many other things, so it's true in the main Star Wars universe, but it should be true here as well. For some reason, no one has figured out that locking the door on an AT-AT or an AT-ST, or really any other Imperial craft, and perhaps not leaving the keys in it, might be a useful thing. Because once again, the ability of anyone to climb into any of these crafts and just turn them on immediately, like, no one's got a LoJack anywhere in this universe? What the heck is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, so I guess...
Yeah.
The LoJack technology's just never made it there. I don't know.
All right. Well, any other last things you wanted to mention?
No. That's all I've got. I appreciate you inviting me on. It's always nice when we can celebrate Star Wars, especially in the animated format. And I'm excited to see what else the Lego Star Wars marriage can bring us. Because, as I said, I just came away from this one really delighted and quite entertained. So we did have a teaser at the end. It wasn't a full-on like MCU post-credit scene, but there was a certain hand that raised up from the lava, so maybe we'll get another one of these next Halloween.
Yeah, the Vinay is definitely not gone forever, nor is his droid. Well, thank you, Scotty, so much. I wanted to say a quick shout-out. I had not even known this property existed until yesterday, when I listened to another great podcast about Star Wars that I always want to recommend to people, but especially now because I literally found out about this through them, the RuPalp's Pod Race. So it's supposed to be a reference to RuPaul's Drag Race.
Nice.
It's 5 queer folks who have very queer perspectives bringing that to talk about Star Wars. And they just talked about this, how much they loved it, and I was like, I need to hear that, and I need to watch this and talk about it. And then literally yesterday I messaged you, and you were willing to watch it and be ready to record on it the next day. So thank you to them, and a huge thank you to you. And I know you're doing so much else these days, J. Scotty. If people want to hear more of your thoughts, you're all over the Stranded Panda universe. Where can people find you?
Yeah, at jscottforreal on Twitter. If you want to check me out on Instagram, it's at jscottyforreal. But my main thing is Animation Deliberation. It's the podcast on the network that tackles action animated. Well, obviously this has been a collaboration between the two shows, so you know about it. But check out Animation Deliberation wherever you get your podcasts. In addition to all the Star Wars coverage that we've made reference to, we've been covering Young Justice. We just finished up our coverage for Season 3 in preparation for Season 4 that's now airing. And then just talking about Star Wars on the other side of the Star fandom, I was talking to Matthew Carroll about maybe doing some coverage for Star Trek Prodigy. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, I think he, on the Star Trek Universe podcast, has actually already put out an episode covering at least the first episode there, but I'm excited to check that one out and maybe link up with them to do some coverage there.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as you said, we have so many great creators in the Stranded Panda Podcast Network, and I love it when we can collaborate like this. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
To our fans, thank you as always. We'd love to hear what you thought. Did you get to see it? Do you now want to see it? Are we more and more putting the Star Wars holiday special into our rearview mirror? We've already had the Lego holiday special. I myself am still a big fan of Wookiee Life Day, even though it's horrible, but, not everyone feels the same. Let us know what you think. Would you love this? Do you hate it? What do you think of the whole Lego idea with Star Wars, with any of these things? You can contact us by going to theethicalpanda.com. You can email us, theethicalpanda@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, The Ethical Panda, or you can find us on Twitter, EthicalPanda77, without the word the, so just EthicalPanda77. The Ethical Panda was a little bit too long for a Twitter handle, unfortunately. And of course, you'll find this podcast, my Superhero Ethics podcast, information about the Marvel Movie Minute podcast I've been doing, where we go through Thor minute by minute, and all the other great things that I've got a chance to do as part of the Stranded Panda podcast network and all other sorts of great things. So please check out that. Please check out strandedpanda.com, where you'll find a lot more by myself, by Jay Scotty, by Jay Scotty's partner in crime at Animation Liberation, Zuhair Ali, and just all sorts of other great folks. So on behalf of myself, everybody, thank you all so much, and have a great day.